Hello everybody, welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia and it's time for Friday Reads. It's the last Friday of July. I've started this video 6 or 7 times. I don't know what's going on. I turn on the camera, I think I know what I'm going to say, and as soon as it comes on, just torrents of nonsensical babbling start to spill forth. So I'm going to try again. Try to rein it in. Try to focus. I hope that you've been having a good week. I've been trying to figure out if July has gone fast or slow. It feels like both is true at the same time, but whatever it is, we are at the end of the month, and I want to talk about what I've been reading this week and what I've been watching this week, and hear from you about what you've been reading or watching or doing as well. Hope that you have been doing well. So let's just get right into it. So in viewing, I think the only thing that we watched was a show on Netflix that had, I don't remember how many episodes, maybe 6, called The Survivors, and it is an adaptation of the Jane Harper novel. I can't remember actually if it's Survivors or The Survivors, but it's from an Australian novel, as I said, by Jane Harper. I think I've read all of her novels. I do like her books, and I had read this, but I didn't remember exactly. I kind of remembered the gist of what was going on, and then about halfway through I suddenly remembered who done it, so then I just had to keep a lid on it because Stephen thought he read it because it all seemed kind of familiar too, but he remembered it even less than I did, so we went ahead and watched it. This is a special unexpected gift getting into your 50s and beyond, is that you can enjoy a mystery all over again because you will forget the essential details. You will have the general framework in your mind that you did read this book, but the crucial piece of who actually did this crime and why will just magically escape, and you can enjoy it all over again. So it was pretty good. And if you do like a mystery show, give it a shot. So right on into the books. I finished, I think, 1, 2, 3 different things this week, and then, no, maybe 4. So first of all, I did finish All the Water in the World by Eiren Caffal. That was a book that I had checked out on this cloud library app that my public library has that I don't care for, because I don't know if I talked about this last time, but it doesn't let you send the book to a reader, so you have to just read it on their app, which has very few settings. You can enlarge the print, but you can't really pick different fonts. There's very minimal options for background colors, and you just can't do very much with it. And then it doesn't hang on to your settings. You'll turn the page and all of a sudden the font's teeny again. You got to adjust it all over again. So it was kind of clunky as far as a reading experience, but they do sometimes have a book with no wait list that is miles deep on Libby. So I have to give them that. And I was able to read this book in a timely manner because it was part of the science fiction double feature project for July. So I'll give it that. So I talked a little bit about this book last week, and my closing thoughts on this are that for me it was just okay. And I think that if somebody doesn't read a lot of dystopian and post-apocalyptic kind of stories, it might work even better for them than it did for me. But I couldn't help but think about it in the framework of a lot of other stories that I've read that I thought were better stories. And the part that was the best, that drew me in to begin with, we didn't stay on it long enough. It's about a group of people that, in the wake of, not fully explained, a series of things have happened, mainly climate change things, but also the inability of the existing infrastructures and systems and governments and everything to respond to this and control and navigate. Like, it just overwhelmed basically all the resources of the world. And so people have just gone kind of feral, left to their own devices. So this group of people who used to have ordinary lives in New York City, and the parents worked at the Natural History Museum. They end up going and making a refuge there during a big flood that hits the city. And so there's a group of people that kind of make a society where they live on the roof of the museum, and they use the resources inside the museum for all kinds of purposes, and they educate the kids in the group, and they have all kinds of survival strategies and plans. And that was very interesting. And if the whole book had been about how they got there, how they made that work, the dangers and things that they encountered living like that, I would have preferred that novel. But what happens is this turns into a we've got to hit the road kind of novel, and that's where it went real tropey for me. And if you have read a number of books about people in post-apocalyptic situations having to take a journey, and I said, okay, well, list 5 or 6 things that always are going to happen in that kind of story, and then that's what happens in the rest of the book. I did like the main character, Noni. I liked her voice. So I guess I'm giving it kind of a mediocre review overall. Then I also read and finished Standing Heavy by GauZ and translated by Frank Wynne from the French. The author is from the Ivory Coast, and if I had better French, I could say Côte d'Ivoire without sounding bad, but it probably sounded bad. So I read this book with the group Reading the Globe, and which is hosted by Roz and Katja. It's a very short novel, and it was quite interesting. It was a book, I wasn't sure how I felt about it through a lot of it. And then when it got to the end, and this was kind of interesting, because partway through, I had some kind of comment in the Discord, and Ross said, well, when you get to the end, like some things kind of come together. And she was right. When I got to the end, it was surprisingly poignant by the time it got to that end piece. So in this book, it follows some men from the Ivory Coast who live in Paris, who immigrated to Paris. They're undocumented workers who are security guards. And I guess they're kind of hired and paid under the table or with false documents. And these are the men who are working at tourist attractions, shopping centers, etc. around the city. And they see and they hear and they observe everything from people of all ages, all cultures, nationalities, tourists. They see it all. And some of this is chronicled in this novel. There are some really funny parts where it is just snapshots of the endless parade of people shopping at a Sephora that is open till an alarmingly late hour, and all the different things that the guards witness going on in the store, and including all the many, many different styles and efforts of shoplifting. Those are very sketchy, almost like notes. And then there's some more narrative passages about the backstory of a couple of these men and how they came to be here, the living conditions. And structurally, it was kind of difficult for me because it was very choppy, and it almost seemed like a study for a novel or notes for a novel, but then that was the novel. So that was kind of difficult for me to get fully engaged, or because I'm always looking for characters to follow, and it sort of jumped around a lot. But then some of the material near the end kind of tied the people together in a way that was satisfying. So overall, I was glad that I read it, and it was really a different perspective. And I'm going to think about this book whenever I'm at a Sephora or when I just am in some kind of a public place and I notice the security people that are just standing there silently. And that title, Standing Heavy, is a phrase that is used for jobs where you are going to stand for hours and hours and hours. It's a very demanding job. And at one point, one of the characters reflects that to do this job, you either have to have a really empty mind where you're just devoid of all thoughts, or you have to have a super rich interior life. And then the next book I finished, I have a copy. So you may have seen my video where I talked through some books trying to choose one for a reread. And I got this wonderful feedback about all of the books, and I am going to reread all of these books in the near future, in the next couple months. The one that I ended up choosing, when it came time to actually read the book, I consulted my moods and I chose Hotel Dulock by Anita Brookner. This book won the Booker Prize in 1984. And I did go back and look at the short list of the prize that year, and I can imagine that there was probably some controversy about this book winning the prize. I saw a couple of heavy hitters in that list. I think Anita was in there, J.G. Ballard. Empire of the Sun, I think, was one of the books. I bet that was the front runner, and then it didn't win. And I didn't read that, but I saw the movie. And what else was in there? David Lodge, with a book that I have read, and might have been Penelope Lively. There was some big names on the list. But Anita Brookner stole the prize with a quiet novel in which not a whole lot happens. I have not gone back and seen what all these little bits and notes are. The thing that surprised me about this book, though, I know that I read it. My mom liked it and she gave it to me. But I would have been, if I read this around 1984 when it came out, I would have been about 18. And it's hard for me to imagine that I liked this book at 18, because going back into it, I thought, okay, it's going to be about this woman who goes to this Swiss hotel with all these dotty, eccentric people, and it's kind of gently funny. But that's not what it is. So Edith is a novelist. She writes romance novels, and they're kind of old-fashioned romance novels. The time period of this book is completely indistinct. It is not in the 80s, but when is it? We're not sure. It can't be, it's in the past. I'm going to guess the 60s, just based on descriptions of clothing and things like that. I know sometimes it feels even older, like 40s, 50s, but there is a reference to Cosmopolitan magazine and liberated women. She has a conversation early in the book with her publisher who tells her that young women want sexier books now and she needs to spice it up, and she disagrees with this and has no plans to spice it up. Edith has suffered some kind of a scandal. Something has happened where she's apparently disgraced herself, and her friend has arranged for her to go and spend some time at this Swiss hotel to clear her mind and get herself together. We don't know what she did or what the scandal is until pretty deep into the book. We know that what it is not is the fact that she has a married lover. So she's in love with this man named David, who's married and has no intention of divorcing. And they have this passionate relationship, but only a couple times a month when he can get away. And her friend and nobody knows about this. It's heavily undercover. It's been going on for years. And that's not what the scandal is. This is heavy on her heart, but something else has happened, and we don't know till later on. So that's not a spoiler, because we find out about David early on, and she's writing to him the whole time she's at this hotel. The thing that surprised me about this was that it is not kooky. It's not about kooky, eccentric people, and it's not really that funny, even though there are some funny descriptions. It's actually a very melancholy book. The pervasive mood in this book is sadness and melancholy and feeling adrift and unsure of what to do. So let's set it down. So Edith goes to this hotel, and she does meet the other people in the hotel, who are mostly women, and she spends a lot of time reflecting on her thoughts about women. And we see women in this book who are kind of all at mercy of men in their lives. There's one woman with an eating disorder whose husband wants her to get it together because he wants for them to have a child. Now, this doesn't age too well, that the solution to having an eating disorder is to go sit at a hotel and stop acting out, which is basically what she's been told to do, rather than get some kind of appropriate help or treatment. But that's in the story. There's also an older woman and her daughter who have a large inheritance, and they spend their time traveling and shopping. And the older woman has to be the center of attention every time she enters the room. Her daughter is glued to her side and attending to her every whim. and there's an older lady who has been relegated to live at the hotel by her son and his wife, who don't want her to live with them, and they live in her home and put her over here in this hotel. And then there's this one guy who's at the hotel. It's kind of the off season. It's in the fall, so the tourists are gone, and it's sort of this old-fashioned, genteel, high-end but out of style sort of hotel, which kind of accentuates this lost in time feeling in the book. And so she spends some time in this hotel, and not a lot happens except some conversations and her thoughts and her letters. I can't really tell you any more about the plot and some decisions that Edith has to make. I wouldn't say it's bleak, but it's not very optimistic about relationships, and especially about women, how they regard themselves and each other, how they treat each other, and their dealings with men as well. It's just, I got to the end, I thought, what am I supposed to take away from this? Because it's pretty downbeat. The writing is lovely. Just as it's slippery to place this novel in time, it's slippery for me to place it now. Like, how out of date is this novel? I don't know. It's kind of weird. I felt like I liked it, but yet didn't relate to it at the same time. Most of what she is thinking about women, and then this dude that comes in and gives her a bunch of mansplaining opinions about what he thinks about women, and I just didn't really agree with any of the points of view in that part of the book. But yet I wanted to know what Edith was going to do and what her choices were going to be and what she was going to decide to do by the end of the book. So I enjoyed reading it, but it wasn't what I expected, I guess is my takeaway from the Hotel Dulock, but it is beautifully written. And I also finished Emma. So Emma is the group read for the Jane Austen in July. It's been a lot of fun. I raced ahead the past day or so because I was finishing up books, and I decided to just indulge myself in Emma and quit reading the 2 chapters a day and just let it out and keep reading it. I already know what's going to happen. I know how it ends because I've read it a bunch of times, and I really loved thinking and focusing on minor characters. And a lot of us in the group Discord did as well, just reflecting on and how they kind of moved up and down in our estimation from repeated readings. And so that was a real joy. Definitely my favorite read. I don't know if it's my favorite read of the whole month. I'd have to go back and look at my whole list. Maybe. But definitely the one with the most sparkle and wit. So that brings me to currently reading. So I went off the script. There were some books that I have not finished from my July TBR. They weren't calling to me. None of them felt like what I felt like reading, which was yesterday, right when I looked around for something to read yesterday evening. Cast my net wider in my library amongst books I have and have not read, and I decided to read West by Carys Davies. I recently purchased this. It's not a library book, even though it still has the library stuff on it. I haven't tried to de-library it yet. I got it on Thrift Books, and I really loved reading Clear last year. It has an odd premise. Okay, first of all, the setting is, I have sort of ascertained, I think it's around somewhere between 1815 to 1820, based on a couple of conversations that our one main character, Cy Bellman, has about the Lewis and Clark expedition and how long ago it was. And he's a widower, kind of around 40 years old. He has a young daughter who's, I think she's 11, 12, named Bess. But Cy, much to the dismay of Bess and his sister Julie, Cy decides to go off on this quest. He has read about the discovery of dinosaur fossils in the mud of Kentucky. Forgot to say, they live in Pennsylvania. They're on a farm in like an hour and a half from the nearest town. He decides that he reads some sort of rumor in this article about how, I guess when they first discovered the fossils, and they weren't really sure, they were just sort of the beginning of paleontology, basically. And he somehow construed from this article that living dinosaurs might still be roaming the plains west of where these were discovered, like in the unexplored territory. He's imagining that there are dinosaurs, living dinosaurs, and he wants to see them. And he feels like he absolutely is compelled and he must go and look for the dinosaurs. So we know from some of his behavior and some things that Julie, his sister, says. He asked Julie to come live and watch Bess and take care of his farm, which she reluctantly does. She's very taciturn, no nonsense kind of woman. She just does not understand this quest. And she thinks he's having what would be called today a midlife crisis. And she also kind of alludes to his mental health and says he hasn't been right lately. He sleeps for stretches and then all of a sudden he has all this energy and he's got to do all these things. Anyway, he gathers all his stuff and he goes off on this quest. And so we're going to alternate between what is happening to him on this journey and then Bess back at home, who has a sharp mind but really, really limited circumstances. She doesn't go to school. He has homeschooled her how to read with a borrowed textbook that he's already returned. The only book in the house is her aunt's Bible. Her aunt is all work and no fun. There's a subscription library in town, but she doesn't have the money to join it, but she desperately wants to. And she has fallen out with her only friend after he made fun of her father. So that's where we are with poor Bess, who has a vivid imagination of her own and nowhere to put it and yearns for her father's letters that have not arrived. And then we're going back and forth. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to be probably not the happiest things. This is obviously he's not going to find dinosaurs. So it's not a speculative novel. It's not going to turn into Jurassic Park. So he's doomed to disappointment and maybe worse. And I don't know what's going to happen to Bess. But this is what I'm reading this weekend. And then I'm also going to be starting another reread, which is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, which is a buddy read with my friend Michael and part of our project where we are very casually and gradually reading the works of Kate DiCamillo. So that is what is happening. I think we're going to start reading that tomorrow. Also, going to have a fun weekend. My daughter Emma and her boyfriend Cooper are coming, and they're bringing both of their cats. So Moo has come and visited many times, but Cooper has a cat named Archie. And everybody is now living in the same apartment, and they spent months acclimating these two cats together. Well, really, they acclimated Moo because he's the feisty diva who didn't like other animals, and Archie's very chill. But they spent months gradually and systematically exposing the cats to each other and until they become best friends. It was a wonderful miracle. So they're coming to visit for the weekend, and they're bringing their cats, and we will see. The cats will probably have a fun time, hopefully, at the house, and the humans too. So I hope you have something fun also going this weekend, and I will be back soon. My next video, I think, will be the August TBR, which I am looking at and trying to put the final touches on, and so I'll be back with that. Have a great weekend.